Welcome to the Veterinary Marketing Podcast, where it's all about helping your veterinary practice attract, engage, and retain clients. Broadcasting a new podcast every Monday from sunny Southern California, here's your host, Brandon Bashirs.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode number 185 of the Veterinary Marketing Podcast. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Today's episode is part 4 of the series of what you have to do when either you're going to be tasking somebody or you're the person that's tasked with being the marketing person. And this came out of just hearing over and over again people saying, okay, I've been tasked with being the person that's in charge of marketing at the practice. What should I do? Where should I start? Where should I go? So this is kind of a response to that, and it's going to help you to understand what you should do, what you should focus on, and help you to build out a plan that's going to work for your practice, because your practice is unique. So before we begin, I want to mention a few things. First, if you haven't done so already, subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. And if you could do me a huge favor, if you're listening on iTunes, be sure to leave me an honest review. I would really appreciate it. Next, if you're not part of the Veterinary Marketing Nerds Facebook group, you need to head on over there. Be sure to request membership there. You just go to Veterinary Marketing Nerds. You go to facebook.com/groups/the Veterinary Marketing Nerds. It's free to join. It's a closed group, so you can ask questions, get help, and just get collaboration and more ideas for marketing your veterinary practice. So let's jump into today's episode, though. So the first 3 parts, we had the overview. We talked about what the whole process kind of looks like in part 1. We talked about in part 2 what you should do to figure out where you are, what kind of digital marketing assets you should have, what you should put together so that you're clear on who you're marketing to, things like that. Very helpful. And then part 3, we talked about creating a plan that's going to work for you and what that looks like at each stage of the funnel, how that's measured and monitored, and things like that. Today, we're talking about how to actually apply this. And I think this is the most important, well, they're all the most important step. You shouldn't skip any of the steps. You shouldn't just jump right into implementation. You shouldn't skip planning and figuring out who your target market is. If you set up those foundational pieces, you're going to have a high greater chance of success if you do these things in order instead of just skipping around and kind of winging it. So for a lot of people, implementation is just, okay, let's do it. Let's get it going and run the ads and things. And I think that's fantastic because you need to actually implement the things that you're learning and listening to. If you're not implementing something that you learn, it's basically just entertainment. And I know for sure that there are a lot more entertaining podcasts out there. So if you're listening to this, chances are you want to actually implement it. So congrats. That's wonderful. I think, especially for myself, I noticed that one thing that I was doing was just consuming tons of information. And it got to the point where I was just consuming. And I had to say to myself, okay, you need to take a break. You need to take these things that you've learned, figure out how they're going to work for you, and apply them. Because you're getting into the habit of just listening to stuff, whether it's podcasts or courses, reading books on business and things. And it was just kind of cluttering up my brain in that I wasn't taking the things and applying them. And so I just want to really encourage you that if you're listening, commit to applying something, do something, take one little step. Small steps add up to big results over time. So that's just one thing. I think there's a 4-part process to applying that makes things typically better, and it goes like this. First, you learn what you are going to do. Number 2 is you process it. You figure out how that's going to apply to me. Number 3 is you actually apply it and you do the thing that you figured out how it's going to work and you processed it. And then number 4 is you tweak it. What are you going to do to fix it and improve it? Or what are the things that you did right that you're going to want to continue to use across other campaigns or other things? So learn, process, apply, and then tweak. So let's talk about the learning process. Where should you be learning from for the best chance of you executing? I think things like this podcast are obviously solid because it's very specific to your veterinary practice. It's veterinary specific, but you can be learning from things that are not veterinary specific. I do this constantly. When I see an ad that stands out to me, when I see an engagement format that stands out to me, when I see a call to action that's different, if I pause and say to for a second, wait a second, why am I paying attention to this? What is this? How is this working? If I say that and it gets me to do a pattern interrupt, that's extremely valuable. So anytime your pattern is interrupted, whether it's an ad that you see that's effective, a call to action that's unique, a piece of direct mail that's interesting, you can learn from anything. If it's making you take a moment to pause, say to yourself, what is this that caused this? I think that probably that's one of the biggest kind of indicators for me that something is good, is that it captures my attention, especially in today's market where your attention is fought over constantly. And we've just come to the point where we pretty much tune out everything. If something captures your attention, it's going to be pretty remarkable. So what is it that caused it to be remarkable? How can you use this? That's the next step, is process it. So, okay, so maybe Volkswagen made a cool ad for a car. How does this apply to my veterinary practice? That's the thing that you need to ask yourself. How could I use this same principle? Because there's typically principles behind, every marketing tactic or strategy out there. And so if you see somebody doing something effective, you could say, I'm going to figure out what the principle behind this is and then apply it to my practice if it's time consuming. If it's, not too time consuming, and if it's actually practical to do that. So every single thing that you follow, and especially if you're thinking of service-based businesses, so that's stuff like your dentist, your chiropractor, oil change places, auto mechanics, places that are local businesses that typically invest more money than veterinary practices do, are people that are doing things that are typically pretty interesting. So not only looking at how they're running their ads and their campaigns, but how they're engaging with you, how they're communicating with you, especially with respect to the telemedicine side of things. I've used telemedicine for my kids because it's terrible to take them to the doctor for the pediatrician. So we use telemedicine, and it's fantastic. It's convenient and wonderful, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that applies to veterinary medicine. But it's interesting also to see how they are marketing their services, how they're explaining their services, how they're positioning themselves, what pain points they're serving, what pain points they're solving, and it just is really interesting to see. So take everything that you see, anything that gives you pause or makes you say, hey, what's this all about? Figure out what is the next thing that we can do. How is typically this going to be able to be applied to my veterinary practice? And then number 2 is, how can I duplicate this without too much work? Because I think if you see something that's really cool and then you start with a project, until you have it tested, you just don't know if it's going to be effective in your market. And so what is kind of the minimum viable product that we can deliver and offer so that we're able to test this quickly? I think that a lot of practices are a little bit nervous to test things just because they don't want to appear to be changing up or doing anything that might make them feel like they're doing something wrong. But the most successful entrepreneurs that I see across every single industry that I've worked in have this thing in common, that they're willing to test things on small tests, which have, typically pretty small downsides. I mean, the worst thing that happens is maybe it's just not a successful ad spend, or the campaign doesn't work, or, small stakes compared to the potential upside in that you could get a new way to stand out and drive a bunch of clients into your practice. So think about, how can we apply this to what we're doing? The next step in this, so learn, process, apply, we actually have to apply what we're doing. Now, there's probably, if you've created a marketing plan like on part 3, there's probably a ton of things that are on your to-do list. So here's my suggestion for getting the most bang for your buck and the most value out of what it is that you're doing. Number 1 is start at the bottom of the funnel. So start with things that are actually going to drive revenue, because that's going to be the most beneficial for you. So for example, if you have on your list that you need to create some video content, you need to create an opt-in for your newsletter, you need to create an offer and a landing page for, let's say, Dental Month, and then an email sequence for Dental Month, and a text message sequence for Dental Month that's going to drive people to appointments, I would suggest starting with the Dental Month appointment work, because that's vital for driving revenue into your practice. And if you start with that, and then you're actually driving revenue and clients into the practice in a way that's measurable and trackable, you're going to be providing a lot more tangible value with the work that you're doing. If you have these systems set up too in place, when you do more awareness marketing, you get more people to become aware of your brand. You have these systems to capture and drive people into the practice, so that It's not just like, okay, we're getting tons of traffic and attention. Now what should we do? We have these things to sell. Let's go get attention that's going to sell these products and services. So start at the bottom of the funnel and then work up from there. So that means building out things like the offers, sales pages, landing pages, email sequences, text message sequences that are driving people to set appointments with you. And then on top of that, the next level is middle funnel. So do things like create your email newsletter opt-ins, create your email campaigns that are going to communicate with people, drive to your Facebook pages for likes and follows and subscribes and shares, and have people taking the next step. And then on top of that, we have the filler awareness content that's going to fill in the holes for driving new people into your practice. So that's what I mean by starting at the bottom of the funnel and then working your way up. And typically, if you have those things at the bottom of the funnel that are there and ready, you're going to see a lot more benefit from the top of funnel activities, because you're going to actually be able to drive revenue from those new eyeballs that you have on your content, which is always a good thing, and that's the purpose of marketing to begin with. So assuming that you're starting at the bottom of the funnel, my next suggestion for applying stuff is to do things that are what are called Evergreen, which are things that last all the time, meaning that you can use it, you set it once, and then it's set up. It is now a system that serves your business. And that's really valuable, because it's going to, I think that a lot of people don't think about marketing in terms of this is a system that you can use to help scale your business, because it allows you to communicate at scale with your customers. And that's amazing. Like, we've never had a time in history until now that you can communicate at scale for free or almost free with your clients as often as you want to. And so if you're setting up things like, your landing pages with your email sequences that follow up, those are evergreen and they're going to produce for you. So once you set it up, it's good to go, and it then performs whether you're awake or not, whether you're looking at it or not. So start there, and make everything that you touch as automated as possible, because you don't want to have to go out and export your leads and then put them into your CRM or, whatever. So make sure that you are, in fact, creating automation as much as possible. So that's the next thing that I think is very important. There are some things that you just can't automate, and that's okay. There needs to be a human touch, because you have a business that you're doing very human work on animals, but you're dealing with their owners and things. And so as much as possible, create automation where you can, that make sure that you're, leaving enough human touch to make sure that people feel like they're being taken care of. So once you have those things set up, then the next step is tweaking your results. Tweaking your next stage of content and offers and things based on how things have gone. So that means that number one, you have to have reporting set up. You need to have analytics set up, and you're actually using the data. So this again goes back to being set up in a way that you understand what the KPI is based on the part of the funnel that you're at, so that you're not just kind of swinging for the fences and hoping that it works. You understand this campaign that we have on is bottom of funnel. We're looking for opt-ins so that we can get people appointments, or we're looking for people to redeem a 20% off dental voucher, or we're looking for people to get a free nail trim voucher. Whatever it is, we understand what the KPIs are, and we understand how to get those KPIs. I think that reporting and analytics is something that I'm super passionate about, because it is ultimately the measurement of how your campaigns are doing. And what do I mean by analytics and reporting? Aren't those the same thing? I don't think they are, because analytics are there measuring data all the time, and so you can dive in there and get as much detail as you want. But the reports are the key, most refined KPIs that you think are going to really make or break the campaign, that are being sent to you, so you don't have to go out and pull those. So I like to create reports that are going to give meaningful data, that we don't have to really comb through and try to figure out what's being said. It's actually, okay, here's what our cost per leads are. Here's how many leads we're getting. How's our click-through rate? How's our conversion rate on the page? And what are the most important KPIs, so that we can apply in the data the insights that we're gathering from the data. I'm going to give you some examples here of just general KPIs that I want to be tracking. If I'm doing bottom of funnel content, I have what are called macro conversions and micro conversions. Macro are let's say we're trying to get a dental appointment. Macro is how many people came in for dental appointments. Pretty simple. Micro conversions are every step along the process to get there. So for example, let's say we're running a Facebook ad for dentals. We have the very first KPI that we're going to be tracking and the micro conversion that we're going to be tracking are how many impressions are we getting? How many times is the ad shown? On top of that, what is our click-through rate? Is our click-through rate appropriate? And that's the first micro conversion. So once they see the ad, they need to click it. Once they click the ad, they need to go to the landing page. Once they get to the landing page, they need to read the content and opt in. If they opted in or clicked the opt-in form and it pops up but they didn't complete it, that is another micro conversion. Once they get to that and the confirmation page, they need to do the follow-up steps to actually get into the practice. There's another micro conversion. So understanding what your micro conversions are along the path of having somebody actually come in and become a customer is extremely important, because then you're going to be able to diagnose what the problem is. Just like if you had somebody come in and they brought their pet cat in and they said, my cat's sick. And you said, well, what's wrong with it? And you just said, well, it's sick. It's not working. Sorry. You'd say, well, are they eating? Let's take its temperature. I'm not a doctor. You know what to do, but you get the point of what I'm saying, right? You have to diagnose the problem and you listen to different steps in a marketing funnel to understand where that problem is happening. So understanding your ads and your KPIs that are going to help you to really get insight from the stuff that you're doing allows you to make changes. Now, when we say tweak, there's two parts that you can change. You can figure out, what do I not want to do next time? And this is an important thing, understanding what you don't want to do, but at the same time, you need to understand what you do want to do. And sometimes you might get a situation too where unfortunately you just don't know. So we have yes, no, and maybe, actually, as I think about this, because there are times too where you're not able to 100% say this campaign was successful or not successful based on this element. Because sometimes it's just not that crystal clear, especially if you don't have enough data. So make sure that you get enough data, and that's another thing that I think is also important before you either kill your campaign or you let it continue to run. And that being said, every time you make a tweak, I would say test just one variable at a time. Let's say you have a campaign that worked okay, but the next time that you run it, you do 10 times the ad spend, you do 4 new ad image creatives, 5 new headlines, a new landing page that you split test against, as well as 2 different email sequences. You would have, unless you were doing a tremendous amount of scale and tracking all of these points at the same time, it would be extremely difficult to figure out what was the thing that made it work, or which elements of this campaign was working. So start small, implement one thing at a time, and just build on that. And those small steps that you take, just especially if you start at the bottom of the funnel and you start with things that are going to work as systems, marketing systems for your business, you're going to be able to just step up incrementally and continue to see positive results as time goes on. So I'm really excited for you. I hope that you implement what you're learning, because if you're not, it's just entertainment. So be sure to actually take some of this and apply something, and let me know what you're applying, because I would love to hear from you. Be sure to head on over to that Facebook group, the Veterinary Marketing Nerds, and I'll see you on next week's episode. Next week, we have a guest, so I'm excited about it. It's going to be a great episode. Be sure to listen. Talk to you later, everybody. Bye.